going on, everyone? And welcome to another episode of Writing Friction. And as always, today's guest is pretty cool and also from New Jersey. Everyone say hello to Mark Leyner. How are you, Mark?
Excellent.
Um, I
Excellent.
I love the backdrop. I mean, I used to have a white backdrop behind me, and then everyone complained, so I had to get the posters. But I appreciate the actual brick. It actually does add a nice little touch.
Well, I, yeah, you have no idea. It sort of gives no clue as to my actual location.
I was going to ask, where are you? Are you bunkering down? Are you in
That's
Jersey?
what I was going to say. It's an underground bunker. It's a former aluminum smelting factory in Serbia.
I had on Julia Phillips. I'm not sure if you know her, but she had a new book,
Yeah.
Disappearing Earth, and she I mean moved to Siberia for 2+ years to write that book.
Oh, that's
Uh,
interesting.
Very interesting. But you're also kind of an interesting guy, and that's why I wanted to talk to you.
That's an interesting thing you bring up because I've been I've been interested. I mean, I sort of as a layperson and as a writer in the needs that various other writers seem to have for special kinds of environments.
Mhm.
Like there are people who need to go and be in deep isolation. Some, well, like this in the woods in Siberia.
Yeah.
There are people I know who need to go to writers' colonies,
Mhm.
which seems really like some clear definition of hell on earth.
That
Being,
answers the
being,
question I was going to ask. Have you ever
being
been to one?
trapped in a remote place with only
Oh,
other writers.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And there are people that need, have special places within their homes and have studios and offices and all kinds of things like that, right? And on the other hand, I don't know what this says about me, seemingly don't need any of that. I can sort of be in the middle of like the housewares department. I could write in an IKEA
Mhm.
in the middle of a store.
Yeah.
I'm just used to sort of, I don't know. It's like some form of. I maybe learned as a kid of sort of spacing out and creating a kind of enclosed space within what would seemingly be the most inhospitable place
Well,
for.
and it could be, and again, we were talking before the podcast. You were born in Jersey City. I was born and raised a couple of miles north of that. It's an
Yeah,
interesting part of the country to be born and raised in, especially Jersey City. I mean, Manhattan's literally 3 minutes away.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think if you're going to be a writer living in that locale, you naturally have to be able to block all that shit out.
Well,
Uh,
also it not only it's I'd go one step further. It's not even something I care to block out. I
mhm.
mean, I was raised near a main street in Jersey City as a little boy. So at night I would hear buses, and it's comforting to me to sort of hear the sounds of sort of life around me. And the first time I ever lived in a place that was really unlike that, it was in graduate school in Boulder, Colorado.
Most definitely, yeah.
And I had this nice little apartment. This was graduate school, and not far from the Rockies, from the
I
mountains.
mean, it comes into the town.
And right, exactly.
Yeah.
And the first couple of weeks or months, I mean, it was so unnerving to me how quiet, like at night, how quiet it was, and quote unquote peaceful. I just was not used to that.
Yeah.
I was used to the comfort of being in neighborhoods, of hearing people around. So
Mhm.
that's sort of, it still abides for me. I'm very happy if I'm working on something to have people coming in and out. It doesn't bother me, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and I think it sort of shows in my work. I think my stuff is very porous to the outside world, and in my books, things enter into them that I overheard or happened to me in the course of the day of the writing of it. It's not siloed off from the rest of the world as much as I think a lot of writers like to keep a very clear separation and have a kind of almost, and I'm not saying this at all in a critical way, it's just different, have a kind of consecrated space for themselves, you know?
Yeah, and that's what, and that this podcast is really shining light on that. Speaking of different authors, I won't get too deep and I won't name any names, but there are certain authors where I'm doing the podcast with them and you see they're in a white room. And I'm like, and I asked them, I'm like, oh, so where are you? Like, well, this is where I write and I live and I eat and I sleep. And I'm like, okay, well, that's how you do it. Again, we were talking before the podcast, I own my own business. I have to be able to write doing laundry. I have to be able to
Yeah,
write with my puppy. I have to be
right.
able I'm writing on my phone. We'll get into all that. I
Well,
kind of want to take.
no, you're bringing up now. This conversation is going the way sort of my work goes, which is kind of everywhere at once. It's
And
very
that's, yeah,
decentered. The center is everywhere.
yeah,
But what you were just saying about needing to, in the middle of something, go do laundry, go walk a dog, do something. I have really found I can't even recall. Let's just take this new book of mine, which is called Last Orgy of the Divine Hermit. Um, I'd be hard pressed to um, come up in my mind with a time where I was sitting there writing it. I just can't recall that part.
yeah.
I'm aware of things accumulating, bits and pieces accumulating somehow on the way to something, or scrawling something actually in the laundry room, or at the supermarket, or walking from one place to another, or especially when I first wake up and I'm drinking coffee and I'm maybe looking at the paper or something, scrawling then, which doesn't even seem like, it never seems like work. It never seems to me like I sit down
Yeah.
and in this sort of the traditional, image of a writer. This is the traditional image of a writer. It's thinking, and then writing, transcribing the thoughts, thinking more. Never. I don't think I've ever done that. It's more of a kind of scavenging around and accumulating material and then working it into something much
I
more
mean,
like that.
you've been writing for a while, and obviously, this is the first time we're talking. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but has it always been like that for you when you first started writing? When did you kind of get serious about writing? I mean, you said you went to graduate school. Was that part of the whole plan? I mean, take us back to the kind of the beginning of where you came from.
I think the beginning, in Jersey City, one set of grandparents had a house on what was called the Boulevard, one of the main streets in Jersey City, and they had a, a nice big living room, and with this sort of archway leading into the dining room. On either side of the archway were books, from sort of floor to ceiling. And I, being little, I mean, I'm still little, but I was even littler
Yeah.
then. I would just gaze up at these books with some kind of almost religious, well, a kind of awestruck reverence of books. I just thought that was the most fantastic thing. And maybe I didn't think of doing it because it just seemed beyond me. It
Mm-hmm.
seemed that my capacities to ever write something.
Yeah.
But I still remember very vividly that feeling of kind of reverence for the books. Then later, when I was maybe 12, 13, um, I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know what that meant. I think one of the reasons, and I've talked about this many times to people, I had a kind of generalized, a kind of non-specific impulse to make things for people. At some point, I think some of it was inspired by music. I've talked about this sort
What
of.
were you listening to?
Well, when I'm talking, if we go back to when I was like 8 or something,
Yeah.
I have I mean, for me, famous memory of seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
Most okay. So you were part of that. You witnessed that. My father as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And thinking, I mean, yes, I'm one of these horrendous people who will talk to you about the Beatles. Talk to, but
Speaking of, he just released a new album.
I mean, I'm not going to talk about the relative merits of the Beatles versus anything else. I like a lot of music and a lot of really contemporary music of all sorts. But the point I'm making here is I saw this thing when I was 8 or whatever, and thought I would like to be able to do something that had an effect on other people. I mean, I wasn't necessarily thinking of screaming adolescent girls or something, although that may be, I think that's a laudable effect of anything you do. But so I think even from that time, I had an idea of, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could make something and sort of hand it to another person, and it would create a kind of new experience for that person.
Yeah.
Some kind of joyful, maybe sublime, maybe terrifying, maybe sort of psychedelic. I don't know, whatever, but have an effect. And I think as I got older, just from a really practical perspective, writing seemed like the most feasible thing. I mean, that's something it doesn't require much in terms of, equipment.
None.
Right? And plus I had, as I said to you before, which was family wide, the idea of being a writer in my family. And there were no writers, but books were a big thing.
Mm-hmm. So is that what brought you eventually to Boulder? Was it writing? I mean, is that
so then I started writing poetry in my early teens. I had a column for my high school newspaper, and then I went to college, and I think by then I thought of myself as that, and I was really serious about it in college. I got some award when I graduated. Shockingly, I didn't expect, for being, I don't know what, but for prose, I think they gave out 2 awards. I was in various creative writing classes, and I became very serious about it. And at from the advice of one of my sort of mentors in college, I applied to a couple of places for writing programs. I didn't even know such a thing existed.
Yeah.
It seemed kind of ridiculous. It still does, but that's okay.
A little bit, but yeah. I mean, well, we talked about that before. I mean, writers.
I have mixed feelings about writing programs, but I had a wonderful experience, and we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't try to dissuade anyone from doing it at all. But and I ended up going to Boulder, because I didn't apply to that many places. I think I might have just applied to 2, Johns Hopkins and University of Colorado in Boulder. And I got, I was lucky, I got into both. It seemed to me that Baltimore was somewhat similar to Jersey City. So I kind of said, okay, I've done that. And Boulder
not far off, yeah.
Boulder was so different, so I did that.
Okay.
And that's how I ended up in Boulder. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what are you writing? Or what are you writing at that time? Are you thinking long form fiction? I mean, you've written so many
at that
things.
time, I had at some time in college, I had kind of switched over. It was a decisive kind of foundational decision. Because I had been writing poetry, and I really loved reading poetry, and I started thinking that a lot of prose that I was reading, probably prose that I was reading in courses I had to take. I mean, I was an English major.
Yeah.
Just seemed sort of lax to me. It seemed like there was a lot of downtime. There was a lot of prose that was.
It's my dog playing with the light. Don't worry.
I thought I was having one of those mini strokes. That's okay.
No. Everyone's well aware of Reba on the podcast. Don't worry. Keep talking. I'll fix it.
I thought, it seems to me in prose there is as I said, I don't know, a kind of, you know how I sort of, I, you read about like on chromosomes and things, junk DNA.
Yeah.
It's sort of taking up space, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything particularly. It's not instructing the production of any specific protein or anything,
Carbohydrates.
you know. So I began thinking, I wonder if one could write prose that had this sort of intensity, where it all felt sort of indispensable and intense and important, the way lines in poems do, you know. So that's that's when I started to try. I mean, so I figured I'd try to do that.
Yeah. And well, I mean, even the titles of your books are intense. I mean, it seems like that's kind of your personality. Was it coming out in your writing?
It may be my personality, but it's very you, and that's a key thing. I um, I decided everything should be that way. Everything should be at this kind of heightened pitch. It's kind of like, you know, edible plates and utensils or something, or the pizzas where the crust is also filled with cheese. That's my philosophy. Like, just put cheese in everything.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You should be able to eat everything: the table, the utensils, the plates, your dinner companion. Everything should have cheese in it and be edible. That's my philosophy.
Well, so you're bubbling with all this stuff, and you go to Boulder, which is not really that kind of vibe, but it's a different vibe, and you do that, and then you move back east. It's
funny, when I was in Boulder, people would say to me, "You're obviously from the East Coast."
I get it.
I mean, from looking like, and I would go, "How do you know?" I mean, this is before we spoke. Oh, just from the way you walk, and you're kind of, you don't seem particularly laid back or calm, and you seem like you're troubled by something or other, and I don't.
I've been living in San Francisco for almost 10 years, and not a single day goes by, not one. And I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. It's not, but I guess I come off, I speak loud,
right,
and people,
we're loud, we speak quickly, we're the volume is high.
Yeah, and I'm Jewish too, so it's like it's even times 10, and it's like
right.
People are just like, I did a podcast. I don't know if you know him, Bob Lefsetz, and he's a Jewish guy from the, and at the end of the podcast he's like, well, you're obviously very Jewish, and I'm just like, I don't know what it is. But all right, but to be honest, I don't want to go too much into Jersey, but it's always benefited me being that kind of person who's grew up where I grew up and moving to the West Coast, which is just a different vibe. It's helped me gain footings on things that I otherwise might not have been able to, just because of my personality. And they're like, you know what? I'm from a place where it's just like everyone's just fucking always just constantly bustling. You have to have that mentality. You have to.
I think I agree. And I think the only way I've been able to do what I've been doing for as long as I've been doing it. I'm going to be 65 in a week.
You look great, Mark.
Oh, thank you. I don't know. Yeah, if you're just saying that, if do you really
trust me, you should see.
I'm a gym rat, so you can't tell.
Same here.
I'm not taking my clothes off, but
no
I do. I mean, I like to feel, feel fit. But the sort of I've always felt that, to use a automotive expression, that I idle high, like at high, like RPM high, and I don't think and I think that's an East Coast thing. I think it's especially, it may be especially an East Coast Jewish thing. I don't know, but it's certainly me. And I think it's enabled me. I think that trait, which is a kind of physiological trait, has something, if not a lot, if not everything, to do with the style I have, which is what I described. And an interesting thing, I think at some point, if you live that way, if you idle high and live at that sort of pitch, it will catch up with you physically at some point. Like I
What?
went, I was at the doctor recently, and I've always known this. I have sort of high blood pressure. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just like And when I'm in the midst of a book, it's
Writing a
just
book.
writing a book. It's just 24-hour, 7-day a week thing. I am never not thinking about it.
Mhm.
There's nothing I hear or see in the world that I don't run through some kind of like algorithm to see if there's a place for it in the book.
And were
Every
you
everything.
well, were you kind of aware of that early on when you were getting into those first books? I mean,
I was aware that I wanted to try to bring the world into what I was writing
yeah.
in a different way from what I saw in other writers.
Mhm.
That I wanted to have a very inclusive, very open, almost kind of insanely inclusive notion of what content was, you know, and allow things to come into the work um, almost, sort of have a completely permeable membrane where anything can come in,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I think that evolved into a sort of that vague idea of what I would like the work to feel like evolved into a kind of methodology that's this intense. I was watching because my daughter's visiting, over the holidays. She lives in Brooklyn,
Okay.
and so we watched that movie Bugsy. Do you know the movie?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Dustin Hoffman.
No,
No. Oh, no. I'm thinking of something. Different
I'm
movie.
just gonna make you guess. That
Sure.
was
Why not?
so off. That was so wrong.
What's the movie where he play? It's a similar title. He's either a cross dresser or what
Oh,
movie?
Tootsie.
I was
I
close.
have
Come on.
never heard anyone ever mention Tootsie and Bugsy in the same conversation.
And now you
You are
have.
you are more out of your mind than I am.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm sorry. So you're
So
watching
that's it.
Bugs.
I like the double feature, Tootsie and Bugsy.
There it is. Yeah. Yeah.
No, Bugsy is about Bugsy Siegel,
Most definitely.
and I was just talking to my daughter and my wife about this in that movie, and you have seen that movie,
No, no, I
Bugsy.
haven't. But I'm well aware of
Oh,
Bugsy.
okay.
I'm well aware
Well,
of Bugsy
no, you
Siegel.
should see it. It's a great movie,
Yeah.
and it's really about among among several things, but in the most reductive sense, it's about this gangster, Jewish gangster's obsession with building the Flamingo Hotel in
Mhm.
Las Vegas, which really began. It was really, in a way, you could say he kind of invented Las Vegas, and he died for it because he just kept spending more of the mob's money, and eventually they decided enough was enough. But his obsession with building the Flamingo Hotel reminded me very much of how I feel in the midst of working on something. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just everything
And it's always been that way for
in
you.
a really obsessive kind of crazy way. But it's my way at this point.
But has it always been that way for you? I mean, even back, in your 20s and
No,
30s
it's
and stuff.
gotten more
More,
and
yeah.
more that way. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what were you doing to support yourself early on? I mean, were you working odd jobs and things
Um,
like that?
I had a teaching assistantship in graduate school
Uh,
or fellowship, whatever it was called at the time. So I got a little money from that.
yeah. And it's also a different time. It's not
Also,
2020. I
life
mean,
was incredibly cheap.
yeah.
I was telling someone this the other day. I had a really nice apartment. It was an apartment complex which had a tennis court and a pool. I don't think I was ever in the pool, but I played tennis. It was a perfectly reasonable apartment. Nice sized living room, little dining room, little kitchen, nice bedroom. But I mean, the Rockies were right there. It was
Yeah.
gorgeous. And it was $250 a month. Seriously,
That's yeah.
they raised the rent while between my first and second year to 275 or
Yeah.
something, and I went crazy. Like I went storming to the
Yeah.
manager and said, "What? This is it's so excessive. What are you talking about?" You know? Yeah, can you
I
imagine
don't know, but yeah,
an
I can
apartment for that
imagine.
kind of money? So, and then after graduate school, I was a waiter.
Yeah.
I think the first kind of job I had was as a copywriter, writing
Oh,
ads
okay.
for an electronics company. I don't think it exists anymore, called Panasonic.
Haven't
And
heard of it.
then I I kind of used that. I might have taught a little bit
Yeah.
as an what do you call it? Adjunct? Is that what it's
Okay.
called?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I never really
But you wanted to be a writer. I mean, you're doing all
I
these
never
things.
really liked teaching. It's not something I've ever done. I mean, I'm probably one of the rare writers that you speak to in this forum who doesn't do that. Um, but I did more copywriting. I had a job at a couple of ad agencies,
Mhm.
and at some point stopped doing that and began to support myself from a combination of my books, which never made a hell of a lot of money, but some between the advance I would get from the books and doing sort of magazine work.
Okay.
I I supported myself.
Yeah.
Then at some point I started doing a little sort of Hollywood stuff like script doctoring and things like that. And
How did you make that jump?
um, I think I'm trying to give you an accurate. I don't want to perjure myself.
And while you're thinking of it, also, was it a different? I mean, were you nervous about entering that world? Was that a world you had known previously? I mean, had you ever written
Oh,
for
I was
before?
very nervous. I was very
Yeah.
nervous about it. There was a guy who liked one of my books, a book
Okay.
called At Two Babe, and he wanted to um, make it into a movie or write a script. And so he arranged a screening of one of his movies in Manhattan, and I went to see it. And I said, okay. I mean, I didn't see any reason for saying no, really. And he wrote a script, and it was really the book kind of typed into final draft. It was there, but and he was a nice guy, and we
Were
became.
you not happy about that?
No, it was fine.
Uh,
I just thought, I just made me think, I don't know if you've ever used Final Draft. Final Draft is it's a screenwriting program,
I'm
but
aware of it. Yeah, yeah.
it does a lot of things. Like it almost immediately you can just you type something on it and suddenly it formats it and you have like 30 pages of a script and you had just written your name or something. It almost writes for you
Yeah.
for itself. But so I think that was, and then we worked together a bit on that, and then we did a couple of other things together.
Okay.
He lived in LA, and we
You never
then
thought about moving out there? Did I
yes,
ever?
I have thought about it many times,
Yeah.
and have spent a lot of time in Los Angeles. But through this guy, I began doing some screenplays of some with him, and then some on my own. And then you know had some representation and started doing that a bit.
Uh-huh.
And at some point, and this was a kind of pivotal thing that happened, and a pivotal in terms of a very good, long-standing relationship. The actor John Cusack read one of my books at Two Babe, the same book
Same
actually,
book.
but this was later. This was years later.
Do you find it interesting that it's your first book that's picking up this kind of
Well,
traction?
that wasn't the
Oh,
first
I'm
book.
sorry. The
There were books before.
Oh, okay.
There was a book. There was a book. I Smell Esther Williams was really my first.
Oh, okay, okay.
Then a book called My Cousin, My Gastroenterologist. I think At Two Babe might have been the
But that was a
third.
short story collection, right? We're talking novels and short
They were
stories.
both really short story collections. For some reason, with My Cousin, My Gastroenterologist, there
Yeah.
was. I think the book company called it a novel. Maybe because novels sell better. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I was constantly asked whether it was actually a novel or,
Okay.
you know,
So that one, but so that one.
which is a particularly uninteresting question, I think, what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
but anyway, So the third book was at Two Babe, and at some point, John Cusack got in touch with me, and at the time when he got in touch with me, I was working on a television show actually that the director Peter Berg was doing for ABC, and I was working on it, and Cusack called the office. I remember this very well because
Because
people
John
were not,
Cusack's calling you.
well, people were not believing that this person was actually calling me.
Yeah.
Anyway, we started working together on things and became friends. We're very good friends to this day, and John was very helpful in getting me little things too, little script doctoring things and whatnot, and that became script doctoring. For people that don't know a silly term, just means there's a script and the producers think it needs a little work, a little doctoring,
Mm-hmm.
So that turned out, all of that turned out to be, probably over the last 15, 20 years, the way that I support myself through doing that now and then, and then my books.
So going back to kind of the beginning
That became, so the sort of script work, either writing scripts from scratch or script doctoring kind of thing, kind of replaced the copywriting or replaced magazine writing as a way for me to earn enough money to be able to devote myself to the thing. I mean, the only thing I really love doing is writing these books. I don't love doing the script stuff. I mean, it's a whole other thing. You asked me if I was nervous when I first started doing it. Yes, terrified. In fact, I had all kinds of physical symptoms of like anxiety and panic attacks and things. I would get chest tension and dizziness and all this stuff for the first thing I did, and which was ridiculous because it's not that. Not to say it's not hard, but we've all grown up watching TV and watching movies. It's not like we don't know what this is. And I just read a few and it became much more comfortable.
Well, that was going to be my question I wanted to ask. You say you're nervous about getting into that. Is there someone who's teaching you how to, or is teaching you how to do
No,
this?
I mean, you can do that. A lot of people do that. And again, a lot of people go to school for it.
Of
and
course, of
graduate school. A lot
course.
of people take courses and do all this stuff. And again, I hasten to say, if that's what a person wants to do, that's fine. I really think this can be learned by simply reading a script. I would say all you need to do is read one. You may only need to read 5 pages of one.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that hard to learn how to do this. You just need to see what the format is, and then imagine you're watching something, and that's it. I don't, there are all kinds of methodologies. There are all kinds of sort of pedagogical methodologies about teaching people how to do it, and 3-act structure and all these kinds of things. But the structure of narratives is so, we've been so inculcated with it. I mean, it's like second nature. We know that. You have. I mean, this is like classic situation. My books are nothing like this, but you introduce a character, you show the character has some dilemma. They try to solve the dilemma. There's a crisis, and then there's some resolution of the crisis. That's every fucking movie ever seen anywhere ever, except for interesting movies that don't do that. But for the most part, the movies you go to the multiplex to see are kind of based on that. I don't think that's worth spending tens of thousands of dollars somewhere to learn how to do, but who am I to?
And for people who are not watching or listening to the podcast or the audio, I'm wearing my Soprano shirt. And you're talking. I mean, you just described the first episode of The Sopranos, and it's like the best television, the best movies, the things like I'm watching. I'm getting a lot of shit for it, but I'm about to finish The Crown on Netflix, which I think is brilliant. I love.
That's so funny you say that, because last night I was saying to Gabby, my daughter, and my wife, I've been hearing a lot of good stuff because we're always looking for something. Like, I love Succession. I mean, Breaking Bad to me is kind of my gold standard.
Okay.
And The Sopranos. I mean, there are a couple, that are just sort of magnificent.
Yeah.
I think probably The Sopranos and Breaking Bad are the two greatest kind of long form.
Well, you said Baltimore. I'm surprised you're not saying The Wire. I'm a huge fan.
But this is, I've, you're gonna hate me for this. I've never seen. My daughter keeps telling me, "When are you gonna do The Wire?" I just have
Yeah.
to. I need to do it.
So speaking of books, movie, I mean that was based off a book, Homicide, that David Simon wrote,
Right.
which I'm pointing out because I have like 30 pages left in it. But yeah, but The Crown, it's slow.
Yeah.
It's very slow, but the dialogue, I mean, the way that the writers of this show fucking nail it.
Yeah,
They nail it.
I'm gonna start tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, as someone who works doing, I mean, you should appreciate it. It's a great show. All right, yeah, we're going all over the place, and it's great. I love this. I love this stuff. So I mean, are you able to, at this point in your career, can you kind of just hop between those two worlds very easily, screenwriting and novel writing? I mean, is it?
No, first of all, it would be inaccurate to say that I just have constant work and I'm turning down,
Of course,
screen work and stuff. I have to hustle a bit for it. Sometimes there isn't any. So,
but like working, I mean, like working that muscle.
That's something that sometimes there are sort of dry periods with that. Sometimes someone will say, "Hey, do you want to work on this? I can sort of hook you up with this person." The book writing is, I mean, I do all the time, and I will if I could be destitute and on the street and I would be doing it. I mean, that's what I am. I use sometimes the example of I am just intrinsically that. That is what writing these books that I do is when I feel most kind of engaged with sort of with the universe, most vividly alive. Nothing comes close. Nothing comes close to that. The other stuff is really just, like my version of babysitting or mowing lawns or something. It's how I make a little money. I don't have that feeling for it in any way that I do for books.
And are you the kind of guy? Do you work on one book at a time, or you kind of always work? Yeah, one project at a time.
Yeah, again, because it's kind of my if I do have a definable kind of aesthetic philosophy, it would include everything, as I was saying before, everything going into that book. The idea that something it might be extraneous or doesn't belong in this book doesn't exist for me. So it would be impossible for me to be working on, let's say, 2-3 things and coming upon some interesting, let's say I overhear something at the supermarket and I think, and I play with that a little and I have that as a kind of card, almost a playing card. It's not my way to think, okay, which project is this going to go? It all goes into the thing I'm writing. All. And part of my methodology in making a book is how do I write something that can accommodate such a wildly diverse, wildly disparate and miscellaneous material. That's kind of one of the problems, in a good way, that I begin with needing to solve. What do I do with this stuff?
And you're talking about standing in line in a grocery store in Jersey City. That's going to lead to a lot of things happening at once. When an idea pops into your head, or do you write it down on your phone? Do you take a voice memo? Are you able to kind of just hold on to it and remember it and get back to it later?
It's changed as technology's changed. I used to, when years and years ago, when I had jobs and I would go to a job, drive to a job in the morning, I was thinking I would make stuff up as I drove. And I would have those experiences. I'm sure you've had the experience of having a drive, like a half hour, 40-minute drive, and you're there and you have no memory of having driven there.
I used to commute every day from Mahwah, New Jersey to Fort Lee before that was my commute.
Yes, I had a job. I had a job for a number of years in Fort Lee, and in fact, I would commute. My commute. I had two jobs where this would happen, and I was working on maybe the same book or two different books.
Yeah.
One involved driving from Hoboken to Summit, New Jersey, which is like 40 minutes, I think. The other involved driving from Hoboken to Fort Lee, which I'd say is like a half hour.
Really? Yeah.
And I would kind of compose stuff in my head and be so immersed in it that I had no memory of the drive. I was in, which I think is really interesting because part of your mind, obviously, I wasn't mowing people down on the street, I wasn't killing anyone. So part of my brain was driving fairly well. But a big part of my brain was involved in this other thing. And they were very separate and doing their thing independently. But the stuff I was kind of, concocting in my head, I would keep repeating to myself so that it was almost like it was an oral tradition of one. Instead of an oral tradition being passed down from generation to generation, it was just constantly passed down to me. So that when I would get to the office where I was working, I would sort of burst in, not let anyone talk to me because I'd forget, go to wherever, if I had an office or a cubicle, whatever, and type the stuff before I forgot it. And I was really good at it. I could remember verbatim, I mean, with no mistakes, like 2-3 pages worth of stuff that I had thought of in the car. So that's how I started doing it, just keeping it.
Yeah.
Then, obviously, if I could, I would always have a pad and jot things down. And, now I'll use my phone. If I'm at the gym, I write stuff down on my phone or wherever I am. Yeah.
I'm into it. Mark, this has been an absolute pleasure. My dog is making a mess of the apartment. Hold on. Thank you. I always ask at this part, what are you doing right now? You have the new book. Can you tell us the title of it again?
I can tell you the title. I don't know if people are going to see this, but this is the book.
How do you get these? I gotta ask, how do you get these names for these books? and who's giving you the okay? Everyone's all good with it always, right?
No.
I can imagine. Yeah.
First of all, the name is really important to me because, first of all, I like, and sometimes, and I think frequently I'll have the title early on.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think my books are simply the books are the book in its entirety is an explanation of why it's called that. The books are just explanations of the titles.
Yeah.
I just first of all, I like being able to tell someone, oh, I'm working on such and such. It's sort of like having a dog and you test the name on it.
Yeah, I can imagine it probably pushes people certain ways. Yeah.
I just like being able to, if someone says, what are you doing? Are you working on anything? Yeah. Last Orgy of the Divine Hermit. Rather than just saying, oh yeah, it's a book, it's a novel. I mean, that sounds so horrible to me. But the title's always, to me, it's been it's the first blast of the book. It needs to,
I agree.
It needs to be something that's somewhat electrifying, I think. Why should it not be?
And when I was younger, I mean, that's how I started reading really in the library. It was kind of like, when I was 12, 13, or whatever, it was more about what had the weirdest title and what, as a kid, you're even picking up on that idea. And I'm the same way. I try to have titles and everything that it's more like,
I mean, there are books and movies. I'm always joking with people like that. There are so many movies and books that have these titles like The Place That Was Never Quite There or something. And I think who the fuck thought that was a memorable title?
Someone.
Or We Were Never Quite Who We Might Have Been.
Yeah.
Like
there was a whole generation of like punk rock bands in the early 2000s who had these names of, like,
but
Last Dying Heart. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But to me, that's always been, that's in a way, that's the first piece of the text, the title.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's really important to me that it should seem like, To me, a title should be like this. Let's say you've been in a mall for several hours and you leave, and there's no cars in the parking lot, none, and your car's not there, and there's this UFO there in the middle of the parking lot. Your encounter with that situation, a reader's encounter with one of my titles should be like that. Like, how did this happen? Is this a good thing? Is this a very bad thing? I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of how I feel about the podcast. Yeah.
But you're asking, do I have a hard time? Yes. I think Last Orgy of the Divine Hermit, I'm not going to name names, but probably someone in my publishing company probably suggested that maybe there's another title we could use that indicates something else about the book. I had a book, it's not the book before this, but 2 books ago, that's called The Sugar Frosted Nutsack.
Well, yeah, again, I don't want to list them all, but yeah, if people want to look, you have great fucking titles.
Again, and they shall go nameless.
Yeah.
People who thought that might not receive a prominent place in the bookstore display, or there might be reviewers who won't review it. They can't use it in their newspaper or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm really, it's one thing I get really ferociously adamant about. No, it has to be called.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a book called The Sugar Frosted Nutsack or Last Orgy of the Divine Hermit, what else could you call them?
Mark, talking to you, I feel like that's the only thing you could have called it. This has been an absolute pleasure. I asked a couple quick questions at the end. 2 things. One, do you do social media, Twitter, Instagram, any of that kind of stuff?
On Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm gonna maybe go back for a little bit on Facebook just because I have this book coming out. But I'm very I wouldn't say very active, but active on Instagram and Twitter. Yeah.
And what's your handle on Instagram and Twitter? Do you know it? If not, we could post it. No worries.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I think on Twitter it's Leyner Mark.
All right.
I think, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's easy enough to find.
We'll put it in. And the last question, where do people buy your books from? What's your favorite bookstore?
There's a bookstore in Hoboken I love. I think it's called Little City.
Yeah.
And shout out to them. There are many little bookstores in Manhattan that I love.
Of course, yeah.
I don't know.
Have you ever done any readings in SF or ever been out to SF?
I've done readings in SF. I haven't for a while.
Yeah.
I did a reading at at City Lights.
Okay.
I don't know if that's even going anymore.
It most definitely is.
Good. Which was really a great honor because I'd heard about that place.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But I love San Francisco. I'd love, hopefully when it's safe for human beings to gather together again, I can come out and we should have a drink.
1000%. Mark, absolute pleasure, man.
Yeah, this was really fun.
Without a doubt. I mean, we're all going to talk to you soon, hopefully.
Okay, man.
All right. Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.